Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for having us. I feel like I need to say thank you for having us here because you're the most exciting founder out of Denmark.
Thank you.
We're all here to learn from you. However, I will start this panel with a question to Luca. So first of all, Excel has had a very long history of investing in AI before it was even a hype. And it has been great to see the great portfolio that you've built over the years across the foundation and application layer. And as AI has been evolving, now obviously everything is AI. So I just wanted to start off with a general question of what you see the biggest opportunity today, especially from European founders, to continue to lead the pack.
Thank you, Laura. First and foremost, thanks everyone for joining us today, and great to be here, as you said, with Victor. Guillermo is playing host here in Copenhagen. But back to your point, Laura, I think, look, it's almost 3 years now since your great company introduced the word ChatGPT. So I think it's good probably to look back and say, hey, 3 years on, there's no smoke anymore. I think AI has really entered the life of us as consumers, of course, but also most importantly, as business users. I think the biggest opportunity we do see right now, it is really bringing that AI capabilities into your way of doing work. That can be across many different layers of application. It can be in a way about creating new categories and products, and Victor and his team has been doing exactly that. Or it can be about changing the way we've been using older legacy vendors across the board, and I guess we're going to discuss this later. But I think the bigger opportunity set, it is by bringing that in everyday life as business professionals. So application.
Victor?
I mean, I think there's so much, right? I think even if we froze all model development today, it would change. I think our entire worlds will change how we work and how we play and how we live. I think there's no doubt now that the models are good enough to build a whole bunch of applications on top of it. I think that's what the ecosystem is doing right now, figuring out what is the most valuable. Productivity is the most obvious answer. I think that's what we're generally seeing where most of the value is created. But I think we're about to move into a phase where we'll see a lot more like end-to-end business automation as opposed to just taking out parts of it.
I could not agree more with both of you, but thank you. So Victor, given that you're very special and we all love Synthesia so much, you have always been ahead of the curve in AI, and you were one of the first in the space, not just in EMEA, but also globally, in one of the best companies in AI. And this year, in 2025, you closed 180 million Series D, and you're now not just valued at 2.1 billion, but you were the highest valued Gen AI media company out of Europe. So first of all, congratulations. But second, how do you continue to innovate and create new value in both the enterprise and the consumer space or across your users? Because one of the great things about you is that you never stop and you're always doing one more thing.
I think we have this internal mantra called utility over novelty, which really just speaks to something actually very simple, but which is like build a product that actually drives value or utility for your customer, right? That sounds very, very obvious, but if you look back at the last, decades of tech, right, we go through these hype cycles where sometimes we forget that it's ultimately about delivering value for someone, not just getting people excited. We've seen lots of metaverse, NFTs, and a whole bunch of AI stuff happening right now, right, which is more about cool demos and exciting people than it's necessarily about building lasting value. The way we look at that is that I think there's a model layer, of course. We still train our own models. We have a pretty big research team that does models for avatars, but we're now also bringing in other people's models, including OpenAI and Google.
We love working with you.
We love working with you too. But really, I think what most of the focus is like, what can you build with these models, right? How can you solve a workflow faster? So when I look at where should we go next, I don't think like, what AI can we build next? I think about what is our customers trying to do and how can we make that easier for them? And it turns out that a lot of the time, if you're building for real use cases in the real world, it's a lot less about the model and it's a lot more about all the boring thing that goes around it, right? We have a video platform. A big part of creating a video is, of course, making the actual video itself. That's pretty obvious. But in a big company, you need approvals. How do you gather people from different places in your organization to give comments on your video and approve the video? How do you share that video? How do you understand the analytics, the insights, right? There's so much stuff that is less about AI and more about workflows that compounded together ultimately is what builds really valuable products. From an AI perspective, we're of course also looking at, what are the new models essentially enabling. So we're coming out with an agent product pretty soon, which essentially moves video from being a pure broadcast. So today, when people make AI videos, they're a video like any other video. You upload it to YouTube, whatever, and you watch it from A to B, has a beginning and an end, right? Everybody watches exactly the same video. What we're launching very soon is videos you can talk to. So if it's a video that's about training or education, for example, rather than just watch the video and hope that people understood the content in it, maybe at the end of the video, you'll go into a live, real-time conversation with the video, which will ask you a bunch of questions. If it's a sales training, maybe the video will pretend to be a customer, and you have to do 15 rounds of questions before you actually get like a pass, right? And so that's one way where we can evolve video as a format by using these new AI tools and combining the content generation technologies that we're most well known for with the intelligence layer that, of course, OpenAI and you guys was the inventor of, really, right? So combining those two things together, but always with the goal in mind of like, what are we trying to optimize for? Not just like, how do we make a cool demo?
So everyone, you've heard it now, Synthesia is going into the agentic workflows. Well, we at OpenAI definitely say that 2025 is the year of agents. And it's very exciting to hear what you're building, but also, Luca, when I think of the conversations we're having, and I'm going to get back to a couple points that you made, but there are companies that you've invested in recently that are actually touching on agentic as well as voice AI, which is the other part of what 2025 is. And I think recently you said that that voice AI is reaching a true inflection point. You invested in Synflow AI. I love working with them. I think it's, again, a great story of European tech. So why don't you tell us a little bit more about Synflow and voice AI?
Yeah, of course, with pleasure. I think, look, what we meant by the fact that voice AI reached an inflection point, we were referring to a couple of things. One, and most important, is really the technology advancement. I think until 12 months ago or so, it was not that easy from a latency perspective, from a quality perspective, to have enough there. Yep. Enough to serve not just customers, but most importantly, as Victor said, enterprise and business users that really need to solve a pain point, need to see value into it. So technology layer has been improving to a level that you can build on top of providers such as Synflow, others, that can enable adoption to quickly catch fire, in our opinion. Voice has always been an important medium. We're all humans, we're always being communicated through voice. I think there's so much more that enterprise and also mid-market and consumer can do thanks to voice applications. So this is something that excites us, and we see with Synflow, hopefully, that many more use cases are going to be developed, because at the end, you're giving the keys on what to do to the final users, and players like Synflow can really enable them to do more and quicker and getting value in a fast way.
So I'll go back to the point you made earlier, and that's part of the conversations we've had in preparing for this, and general conversations we've had, which is, you just said you have to build for the value and the uses that are happening in the market today, but you also need to have a view of the future. How much time do you spend looking at what customers and enterprises are doing today versus how you expect use cases to come in the future? And then you, Luca, when you're investing in founders, how do you advise them to think about that?
I mean, I would say it's probably something like 50-50 in terms of 50% of like building things that our customers very obviously needs and very obviously tells us that they need, right? But I think if you want to win, especially in this phase of the market where there's still so much innovation to happen, there's so much fog of war, like nobody really knows what the final AI video platform is going to look like, right? You also have to take bets, and you have to build things that your customers don't tell you to build. But the way you make those right decisions, right, is like being very deeply embedded with your customers, really understanding what they're trying to do, why they're trying to do it, what are the bloggers are doing, what they want, and you have to be very much in tune with what's going on with the latest model developments and other companies around you. So I think there's sort of like 50% is maybe like looking inwards at the customers and building things that are very obvious that we know is going to be valuable, and 50% of the time we spend on like trying to innovate, right? And trying to innovate is always hard. Not all those things ultimately succeed, but if you only listen to customers, you're going to get caught in a local maximum, right? And I think you look at the history of innovation and technologies, that is usually more what kills companies than being super wrong on the innovation bets. Because innovation bets, you'll be much clearer wrong in some sense, so you can do more of them. But being stuck in a local maximum can kill a company.
Luca?
Yeah, and connected with that, I think, look, at the end of the day, people like us tend to search for people that are passionate and have insights about...
And excellent.
Of course, but ultimately have capabilities of really innovation. Innovation means continue to try to listen to customer while pondering what is right to do and why, having insights, having grit, because ultimately creating a company, unfortunately, is never easy, and it's never a straight line up to the right, but requires a lot of dedication and adaptation. So I think we're trying to look for those traits, all combined together.
Thank you. I asked this question because obviously in my role, I work with a lot of founders. So if you're a founder across Europe, Middle East, and Africa, and you're building an AI, most likely you're also using one of OpenAI's models, and I get to see what people are building. And what always gets me very excited, and it's great to hear this from both of you, is that I think founders who understand two things at the same time, that on the one hand, there are things that will always stay the same. People want good products that work, products that continue to adapt to their needs and evolve, and that have good pricing. Like, these are the very basics. But on the other hand, you need to have, as you said, a view of where the world is going to go and how you're going to change the value chain. What are the dependencies? What goes before and after? And yet, on the very basics of the technology, and especially with AI, how to put in a relative and relevant abstraction that allows for new things to come in. As the world is evolving, as the needs are changing, as the business models change, how to have that technology continue to change with it as well. So, thank you, but I don't know if you want to add anything to that?
No, I think that's right. I think that's the hard part about being an entrepreneur, right?
So then the follow-up to that is you recently introduced AI dubbing to localize video at scale. Luca said he's now finding this inflection point in voice. How do you evolve voice AI and find localization that matters? And what is your perspective for building in Europe and localization in different languages here?
So I think what happened, actually when we founded the company in 2017, we built AI dubbing as the first product. But back then, basically it didn't really work. It was like you had to look straight at the camera, you had to use a real voiceover. It was just way too immature, right? So making a video back then would take 2 PhDs, 2 weeks, and the quality would still be questionable. Now, because the model is so much better, right? We have amazing voice cloning technology where with just a few seconds of someone's voice, you can actually replicate it in pretty high quality. We have great transcription with Whisper, for example, which is an open source model you guys created. And so now we have all the components to make basically a drag and drop video translation tool where you can take any video that's ever been created, you drop it into the system, you pick the language you want, and it comes out that language where we've synchronized the lips, we've cloned the voice, so it's actually your voice speaking in Spanish, German, etc. I think this is like a good example of like we were too early the first time we tried it. Like the technology just wasn't mature enough yet for it to really be a product that could actually work. Now the technologies are mature enough, and it's a great product, and now it's taking off, right? But there we were too early, and I think that's like. There's a lot of people, I think, who are trying to do things right now that are too early, but probably will be a thing eventually. And this is, I guess, one example of very particular around like voice AI.
Making the right bets even early gives you an advantage over time.
Yeah, I think that's the right mindset. At the end of the day, it's not just about bets, but it's more deliberate decision on investing into areas that you think are going to matter and you think are going to yield results over time.
Well, speaking of investing, so Excel has backed and continues to back some of the best companies out of Europe and startups. I think you're probably the international VC that has had the largest volume of unicorns out of Europe, if I'm not mistaken. And you have a track record that continues to double down. You're investing both in consumer space, enterprise space. Now you're investing in like code generation companies. And some of your companies are seeing growth by integrating AI in use cases when they didn't start off as AI startups. So how do you advise companies that started off with something else to continue to integrate AI there?
Look, I think ultimately you should think in a simplistic way as following. When we were thinking about cloud 10, 15 years ago, you were saying, and we were debating with entrepreneurs, software can only exist together with cloud going forward. Now, we should be thinking the same. Cloud can only exist together with AI going forward. So if you built a software company over the last few years, which was not an AI native product, now you need to embed AI functionalities. And doesn't mean that you're going to be behind. It means that you need to make sure that you do two things. On one side, leverage your workflow advantage, data advantage, positioning advantage. And on the other side, adding unique insights to that. So what we've been advising and observing has been that the best companies that sits on right level of information data, that have built right workflows that are touching important processes across enterprise or SMEs processes, they can have a natural way to launch interesting products that are embedded with AI. Now, it's not always easy to do, of course, and I think the reality
But essential for continuing to scale,
yeah.
right?
But I think you've seen now from the largest public company to the large private companies that are, as I said, not AI native, quite a few that have been able to make strides. And I think we're going to see more and more, I think, going forward. There's no doubt.
Again, talking about Excel and the great work that you personally do, Luca, I think I came to your FinTech Summit, European FinTech Summit that Excel hosts every other year, which is incredibly insightful to see how companies that started as FinTech are introducing AI across the board. So I don't know if you have any insights specifically for FinTech.
Yeah, I think that's an area where probably we have seen as consumer a bit less, right? Because it's been regulatory difficult to do that. But I think internally those financial service businesses bring AI a lot much more in their core of operation, things about transaction monitoring, things about payment operations, things about everything related to AI and security. So there's a lot that's going on behind the curtains, but not yet much on the consumer front end. I'm hopeful, we are hopeful that we're going to see more happening, but I think there's a bit of a limitation still from the regulator side of things that doesn't allow entrepreneurs to create more freedom yet.
So the diametric opposite of FinTech, I think, is consumer space, so B2C. I was very excited, Victor, to see that Synthesia has launched the Talent Experience Program. And I've been hearing extremely positive feedback on it. So selfie avatars, personal avatars, how do you see AI and Synthesia unlocking new opportunities in the consumer level?
What we've always seen is that as the quality of the voices and the avatars and AI video gets better and better, you basically unlock more and more TAM. So like in 2020, when we launched the first avatars, they were very clearly not good enough for any kind of entertainment content, any kind of social media content. They were good enough for like some very specific internal corporate training use cases. And now the quality's gotten a lot better, and I think we're getting to the point where you can begin to create more kind of social media, entertainment content. It's not really a world we focus that much on. Honestly, we're very like enterprise focused. That's kind of like the very clear market that we're going for. But I think what's going to happen, or what is happening now, right, is just that as the technologies gets more accessible, the quality gets higher and higher, they just begin to make sense for way more use cases than they did before. And in our case of like media generation, what you'll begin to see is that the small shop on the corner can somewhat better compete with a really big, food company, because they can also generate what looks like cool advertisements that 5 years ago would have cost, $200,000 to shoot. Now it just takes someone with a creative brain and a lot of prompting and get to something that's very cool, right? So it'll be this like great equalizer where it's going to be less about who has the budget to produce all this media content. It's going to be more about like who has the best ideas and the best execution.
Thank you. Luca, what do you think about consumer space and consumer startups evolving in Europe and out of Europe specifically?
Specifically out of Europe. Look, I think Europe has been able, if you look back again 10, 15 years, to produce some very interesting consumer stories. Now, when you look globally at the moment, you don't see yet any true consumer AI, apart from some examples of companies more lovable that you can argue are also consumer, but not purely consumer. I think we haven't seen yet new experiences emerging out of AI-centric products. I don't think we shop yet with AI centricity. I don't think we are consuming media to a certain extent yet with AI embedded. I don't think in gaming you have seen much. So I think you do have some core areas that are still pretty open, where Europe historically played a big role. I think of gaming as one obvious one. But I think of e-commerce and future marketplaces, another one. I think there, personally, I'm very excited to really see what entrepreneurs are going to build, because I think we're still in the early innings of what can be done.
A lot of opportunity still.
Yeah, I think so. We think so, yes.
Well, when I look at your portfolio, and again, tying to what you said, you're starting as an enterprise company, but it bleeds into what is consumer or individuals who can become solopreneurs, which Lovable also often talks about. So when I think of your portfolio, you have Lovable now, you have Framer, Tynes. There's multiple companies that are really focused on what the developer looks like and developer guardrails, etc. So how do you continue to create value that has the potential to be at unicorn level in a world that is getting so much more fragmented, and yet opportunities created because of AI? Like, do you see a role that both of you play in that space?
I think so. I think, again, simplistic terms, I think we're seeing democratization, right? We're seeing expansion of how many people can be because of Lovable, can be because of tools that are helping people to code more efficiently. You're reducing the barrier, which historically means expanding the market and expanding the pie. More people can create, more people can build, means usually bigger market opportunities, right? Because you are now targeting way larger part of the market. We love developer-centric products still today, but I think it's great to see that we do have now the means to enabling a way vaster population to build technology product. So we do see that as additive, not as a limitation.
I think it's additive too, but.
Yeah, I think it's very clear. We're just creating so many new creators, right? And I mean, people are getting better at writing by using OpenAI, thus creating more text. People are able to make videos without having to use a camera with Synthesia. People have to generate images without shooting cameras. And I think we've seen this even before the AI era, right? Like, I think a lot of investors were very surprised by how big Canva could get on like pretty simple graphic design. But it just turns out that like as humans, we're inherently creative, right? We want to create things. And there's just so many people in the world that have something to say, no matter if it's a birthday invitation or if it's content they're making in their corporate job. And I think there's all these new tools now that are enabling that. And I actually think that one of the best proxies of thinking about this is like how many people in the world use Word or Google Docs or whatever, right? Like that's probably almost everyone in the world, at least in like developing countries, knows how to use those tools. That's a completely expected skill to have, right? But like if you go back 60 years in time, before we had computers, writing things was someone's job. You had typewriters and secretaries who would write things, right? Most people didn't go about their day writing things. And so what's happening now is that we're evolving from being like writers, we don't even think of us as being writers anymore, to becoming kind of designers with like Canva, Figma, PowerPoint, I would also put in that era, video directors, and I don't know, maybe agent creators or software developers very soon. So I just think the average person, right, their skill set is just going to increase massively. And I'm sure when we look back in, I don't know what the timeline is, 50 years, 100 years, creating software is not a skill that anyone is impressed by. It's like, oh, you know how to use Microsoft Word?
But
amazing,
creating
right?
companies is.
But creating companies, there'll be some other things that'll be hard, right? But it won't be like making a video. It won't be like making a very simple app that does something. And I think that's kind of the trajectory on, right? It'll take time, but I think that's what's eventually going to happen.
I think that's an excellent point that actually ties into one of the questions that this lovely audience has posted, which is, what is the ideal AI startup team structure by role percentage, engineers, etc.? I'm going to slightly reform, apologies to whoever asked the question, to, first of all, how do you use AI internally with, like, for your own workflows, first of all? And second, the reason why I'm asking this question, and I'm tying it to the audience question here, is because when I talk to startups, I hear a lot of founders and engineering teams say, it used to take us 2 to 3 weeks to do a sprint or to do a turn on something, whereas now using some of these tools, whether it is ChatGPT or Codex or others, that they are going into like 3-day sprints. And that then allows for a lot more ideation internally, but also more people within the team being able to do more with less and faster, as well as getting involved in projects that normally they would have been a bit apart. So how do you think about company formation, staffing, and tools that you're using internally? And then obviously for you, as you invest in companies, how do you advise them on that?
I think for me, it's a lot of, it's just like productivity, right? Doing faster research, helping write things faster. Like in the company, of course, we use it when we can, and we everyone can come to me with an idea of how they think they can automate something with AI. Customer support, content moderation is a big thing for us. Our sales team uses LLMs also to prepare for calls. Like a lot of these processes, we're just kind of slowly letting people build their own small GPTs with that does something, and then sometimes we productize them for real. So I think that works pretty well.
And you've seen a market difference in your productivity internally?
I think it's very hard to measure these things, but self-reported productivity and I think felt productivity, the vibe is definitely a little more productive. But I think it is really hard, right? I also think with doing sprints faster, and I mean I think all that stuff is real. I still think that there's a lot of hyperbole in terms of like how much can you actually vibe code like for real production code. My sense is that when talking to engineers, developers that build things that actually go into production, it's still like autocomplete on steroids more than it's like just like build this thing for me and I'll just check if the code actually works, right? That will probably change in the future, but I think it's still very much like in the prototyping sort of space, it feels like it's accelerating and PMs can now get further without having to touch code themselves and at least demonstrating a concept or an idea. But I don't know, my sense is that for real production apps, I think code gen still has some way to go.
Great.
Yeah, maybe building and adding on this. I think you've seen basically two bigger buckets. On one side, internal productivity, everything Victor said about customer, the obvious one, customer support, IT development, but also sales, but also product, everything that really touch a lot of repetitive human work that now can be streamlined and can be optimized. So that's one obvious bucket. The second is more on the creativity side and what you probably alluding to, Laura, which is faster iteration, deeper, faster ability to launch multiple things on the same time, and frankly also deciding what not to do. I think I've seen good use cases from both small and large companies that are really deciding faster what not to do, thanks to AI, because maybe they can A/B test or they can ideate around concept that didn't want to try or didn't want to have to invest too much resources. Now they can, and they say, okay, this is I like, this one I don't. So we're seeing a bit of that. But I think every single company is also different, right? So every single segment, sector is a bit unique in a way.
Yep. I think it's fascinating to hear the insight, especially from an investor perspective, where you see so many different companies across so many verticals that have different styles of building, different teams, as per the question. And yet, do you expect a similarity in the speed that they're working, or do you impose anything because of the tools that they now have available, or do you give them full creative freedom?
I think you see some path. I think you will see some common, let's say, experimentation and sharing of best practice. We're seeing and we're fostering that. We're trying to do that with some of our, especially the early stage companies or the very mature ones, because I think you don't need to reinvent the wheel all the time, right? So you can also leverage what somebody else has been doing before you. But on vice versa, I think there's so much unique creativity happening that I think is also good to make sure that team can experiment a bit more. So I think you're seeing those two forces at play at the moment. And I think for the foreseeable future, I do see that remaining to be the case. I don't think we're going to have a unified way of leveraging AI for internal use cases across different companies.
Well, there's a bird here. No, I think it's great because, again, in prepping, we are having this conversation that good VCs and good founders have a level of trust. So you're investing in founders that are technical, that have good ideas, that have a good view of where they're going, of what future they're creating. There's stuff you want to see, but you still are allowed to build at the pace and at the vision that you want, which I think is great to see from the best companies. Very specifically to you, Victor, we're in Copenhagen. You're Danish, you're back home. Any advice that you would give to people building out of Denmark today?
I think it's really hard to build a global company from Denmark, unfortunately. I think there's still so many structural issues that makes it hard. So I would say, like, depending on what the ambition and the scale of company you're trying to build is, like, you have to look outside of Denmark, like, pretty quickly. Where that is can be debated, but it is difficult, right? Like, you're going to at some point need a lot of talent very quickly. The talent base here, there's good talent here, but there's not a lot of it, and there's not a lot of people who've seen true scale. And then, of course, all the structural stuff that makes it difficult, right? Like tax, option structures, like all these things makes it very difficult, I think, to build out of Copenhagen. So I wish it was much easier and I could be more positive, but I unfortunately think that, and I think the track record also shows, right, that most Danish founders end up leaving the country very quickly because it just doesn't have what you need to build a big company.
And for Danish people who are trying to be more technical, just on the technical side, what should they be focusing on while here? Other than how to leave.
I don't think there's anything specific because you're in Denmark you can focus on, right? I think it's about find a problem that's worth solving. It's a big enough market. Figure out how to build a prototype quickly. Yep. Show it to people. Get feedback on it. If you vibe code it, great. If you code it without vibe coding, also great. Like find out what's worth building as quickly as you can, and then start building it, and then figure out how to scale it, no matter if it's in Denmark or somewhere else.
Without getting too much on regulatory, let's say, suggestion, but I will maybe iterate on two important points, right, that are valid for Denmark and beyond. I think ultimately the most ambitious founders want to create big businesses. Big businesses are global in nature, especially in technology. So no matter what, I think if you build today, especially from Europe, you need to think global from day one. That's a common thread that I think has to be the case. And second, has to think about global competition, because no matter what, your lens has to be expanded. And I think you need to think that way also early on, because otherwise you're going to be maybe satisfied by some level of achievement and milestones that unfortunately are not exactly at global level. So measure yourself with the best is also important.
I completely echo both things. And I was born and raised in Greece, so I also come from a smaller market. And I think that no matter where you are in Europe, Middle East, or Africa, which is I've built my whole career working with European founders and investors, and I think there's incredible talent, technical and business, across the region. There's incredible ambition as well, but absolutely when we see, again, one of the best companies out of Europe in AI, it's because you've always had this global ambition. And definitely when I see the technical stack of companies, they're building in a way that isn't to be integrated in one market or in one language, but they have English in their office, they speak internationally, or they speak internally in a way that says we're going to go international from day one. I think we have to close. So very last question. One quick piece of advice from both of you to founders.
Well, I can maybe end on a positive note on the Denmark point, right? I think there's a lot of amazing things we can bring from Denmark to building companies. I think the fact that we generally have a low bullshit culture is very important running a startup. I think not a lot of hierarchy, being very direct with people, actually caring about your employees, not just like very American, like transactional way of running companies. I think at least we found a lot of success with that on the global stage. I think you can build a company that people identify with more and want to work for. And so I think some of those things are, I think, a huge strength from Danish culture that you can bring with you as you build your company.
Thank you.